Hey there. So this video is going to explain what a query is and how you can use it to pull data off of a database. I'll also briefly explain what exactly a database is if you're not familiar with that. And finally, I'll close out with some examples that are pretty easy to follow to illustrate all the concepts that I talked about, and hopefully you'll have a much better understanding of what you need to do and go out there and try to practice it yourself. So first and foremost, we need to talk about how queries can be used. So data is stored in databases, as we know, and there's two different types of databases. You can have a structured database and an unstructured database. So SQL and queries are meant to be used on structured data. So an example would be structured data is stuff that's stored in tables with rows and columns. Imagine you just have a bunch of spreadsheets in Excel, and that essentially makes up your database. So unstructured data would be something that's stored more like a bunch of emails on a database. So here is an example table that I created in Excel. It's not a real table, but for all intents and purposes, this will hopefully give you a visualization of how the data is stored. So over here we can see that this table, it's called people, it's the table name. It also has these column names over here: first name, last name, age, and city. Table individually consists of things like rows, which I'm highlighting the first row over here, as well as columns. As you can see, I'm highlighting the first column, which is called first name, and it has all the first names of the people that are consisting of the people table. So SQL itself, it's just a computer language that's used to basically get data out of tables or tables that you want as a report. So here's the general structure of an SQL query. So you do select column name from table where column name has a condition. So an example would be like, let's say I want to see the first name, because you're selecting the column that you want to have displayed. From what table is that column on? It would be the people table. So select first name from people where first name, and it could be any other condition with this column name. It doesn't necessarily have to be the first name, but let's say I did where first name is equal to Benjamin, and it would pull this record right here. Alternatively, I could say where age, which is another column, is equal to 68, and it would pull over Benny Hill. Another thing I could do is like where city is equal to Los Angeles, then it would pull these two records, Benjamin and Kelly. Or I could even say something along the lines of where the age is greater than 40, and then I would grab these records over here: Kelly, Raj, Benjamin, and Benny. Oh, actually, you know what? My first example where I said the first name is Benjamin, actually I would have pulled two records. I missed the Benjamin Scott over here. My bad. We're ready now to see a couple of examples. So let's dive right into the Excel examples that I was talking about. So before we dive into writing some queries, a few things that I want to note with queries, as I highlighted over here. Queries, well, SQL itself, it's not case sensitive for things like names. So for example, this brown part over, the black part, if I put select in uppercase or lowercase or switching it up, it doesn't matter. Like the SQL program is still going to accept that select as the same thing. And same with the column name and the table name. It's not case sensitive at all, but it is case sensitive when it comes to conditions. Basically, let's say I wanted to select somebody where the first name is Brian, and I put equals Brian. I would have to spell Brian exactly the way it is in this column if I wanted this record to get selected. So I'd have to put a capital B and lowercase RIAN. If I did all caps Brian or all lowercase Brian, it wouldn't work. So here's the first example of the query that we're writing. Queries, they're also space insensitive in the sense that you can write one query on as many lines as you want. So you see over here, I split this up into different lines just to make it a little bit more readable for myself. And that's just fine for the program. It's gonna read that entire thing as a single line, and it gets terminated based off of the semicolon over here. Once you have the semicolon, that's the end of the query, and then everything before that is just one line to the program. So the query I have over here is select star from people, which means select all of the columns from the people table. And the conditions here are where age, the column age, has a value greater than 40, or the person's city, the city column has a value of Seattle, or the city column has a value of New York. So we take a look at the table over here and we can see, let's start first with age, where the age is greater than 40. And you see I highlighted every person who has an age greater than 40. So all of these records are guaranteed to already show up, right, in this particular query. And the city as well is Seattle and New York. So because I did the or Seattle or New York, it's just looking at each one of these individually, and if any of them are a positive hit, it selects the record and it shows it to you. So you see over here this record with number 6, it wouldn't have been selected had I not put the or city equals Seattle or city equals New York portion. If it was just the age over 40, it would have been this first portion over here, these 4 records, but now we're going to get this additional one as well. So this would be the result that we're taking a look at. So let's move on to the next example over here. It's similar to the previous query, except I changed it a little bit. So we can see it says select star from people, same as before, where the age is greater than 40, also the same as before, but instead of or, I put and I put a parentheses here because mathematically, you know, the stuff in the parentheses gets treated as one object. What does that mean in plain English? Show me the records from the people table where the age is higher than 40 and the person is from Seattle or New York. So we take a look over here. The age that's greater than 40 is the same as before, these 4 records, right? But now that we have an and, that means that in addition to the age being greater than 40, we also have another condition that needs to be met. And if this condition is not met, then the record doesn't get considered. I don't want to see that record. So for example, city equals Seattle or city equals New York. There's a Seattle and there's a New York. There's Seattle's here. But you see over here that this person, record 3, Kelly, doesn't have the city in Seattle or New York. And same with Benny. He doesn't have a city in Seattle or New York. So these 2 guys are not going to be selected and displayed because of the and condition, because they're not meeting the second condition of this query. In addition to that, Alexander on record 6, he does have a city in Seattle or New York, but he's not over the first, he doesn't meet the first condition where his age is greater than 40. He's below that mark, so he also doesn't get displayed. These 2 records are the only records that meet the condition for this query. So we would end up seeing these 2 results if we were to execute this query in a database on this particular table. So to continue on with our examples, we can see over here that rather than doing select star, I only want to. So the query over here, we can see that the condition is a little bit different. There's no equals. So there's 2 things that are different about it that you'll probably notice. There is a first name column, but there also is an upper and a like, and this little percentage sign symbol over here that you probably don't recognize. But let's start from the beginning of this statement. So where upper first name, upper is a command within SQL that you can use to treat every column in a string as uppercase. So this is pretty useful if, let's say, I mentioned earlier, like, you know, you might want something that's case insensitive. You want to do a case insensitive search. So you would probably utilize this type of a command in order to do that. So maybe I don't want to, you know, get dinged for having certain entries. Like, you know, when people type in data, they don't always uppercase or spell correctly. So somebody might write their name like Benjamin, and if I put, I want my name, I want all the records where the person's name is Benjamin, these 2 would get selected with an uppercase if I were to write Benjamin with an uppercase, but this wouldn't get selected. So how do you work around that? Well, this is the way you do that. You type upper and you do the column that you're uppercasing, and then you also set your condition equal to uppercase as well so that they both match. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is like. Like is basically a substring search. I'm looking for all of the first names that have the word Ben in it. So I don't necessarily just want to find Benjamin and Benny. I could do like, something like where first name is equal to Benjamin and first name is equal to Benny. And that would work, right, to get this same type of result. But then what if there's also a Ben in there? Then I'd have to do first name is equal to Ben. What about Benji and first name is equal to Benji, right? But what if I just want to capture all of these because the one thing that they have in common is that they all have the word Ben in there? Well, I could do like, so first name, like, and then you put it in strings, Ben. So what the percentage sign here symbolizes is an SQL wildcard. So that means that the percentage sign in particular means like 0, 1, or more of any character. So by putting a percentage sign before and after the string that I'm looking for, that basically means like if the guy's name was McBen, for example, then McBen would also be a valid find inside of this table. So I wouldn't just find people whose name starts with Ben, but I'd also find anyone whose name also happens to have the word Ben in it. How do you remove that? Well, you could just remove the wildcard over here, and then it would just be finding everyone whose name starts with Ben. And if I did it this way, well, you would just find Ben this way. But if, let's say I just did it in the front, you would find everyone whose name ends with Ben. So maybe something like Gavin would be something that would fall under here, but all these other Bens would not get found. This is another query over here, and what I'm showing you is how you can reference two tables at the same time. In this case, we only have one table in our example, but that's okay. You can still reference two instances of the same table twice. So I'm going to show you that right here. So one thing we're going to see that's different from the previous examples is select, and we can see a couple of new things is that the distinct and these P1, P2 with the column name. What does that mean? Well, we're going to get into that. And this little arrow sign thing, we'll get into that as well. So if you have duplicates in your results that you're trying to get rid of, adding the distinct to your select statement will remove all of those duplicates such that you're only being shown the unique results. So this whole P1 dot and P2 dot that we're seeing over here, if you take a look at this yellow portion over here, I bid select distinct first name, last name, city from people P1, comma, people P2. And what that means is that it's like having a variable that's called P1 equals people. And you have another variable called P2 also equals people. That's the way SQL assigns it. So what that means is that I'm basically assigning people as the variable P1 as well as P2. So they're both the same, but they're two different instances. That's the important thing that you want to remember. And you can do this not with just the same table, but any other table. Like you could do P2 is equal to address, or maybe criminals, or whatever kind of search you're trying to do. So next we're going to go into the condition of this query. So where P1 record and the two arrow signs pointing away from each other, that basically means does not equal in SQL. If we take a look at the plain English definition that I wrote out, display the first name, last name, and city of every person who comes from the same city as another person. So what that means is show me everyone who comes from the same city, but I don't want to see that person themselves. So if I didn't put the P1 record does not equal P2 record, that means that, assuming I didn't have this distinct over here, this Benjamin would show up twice because, hey, there's a P1, there's a Benjamin in the first table, there's a Benjamin in the second table. So that means that the record Benjamin on the first table matches the record Benjamin on the second table. So one thing that I really want to emphasize here is where the P1 record doesn't equal P2 record, because without this, if we just had where P1 city equals P2 city, you would end up getting this entire table back. It would be the same as writing, select first name, last name, city from people without any condition. So that's why we put the P1 record doesn't equal P2 record, because we're not looking for a match to itself. Because you can see over here that record number one, if we're looking at record number one and we want to find all the other records that have the same city as record number one, which is Los Angeles, well, we're looking at a second instance of the same table, and well, hey, look, record number one also has the city of Los Angeles. So record number one will match with record number one on the second table, and you'll get the result back of record number one. Same with record number two. Hey, there's only one record of Denver, but because you're not having the condition of you don't want the records to match, it says like, well, hey, there's another Denver record over here on table two, so I'm going to spit that back out too. So by putting this P1 record doesn't equal P2 record, it restricts the record in the first table from matching with the same record on the second table. So that's an important thing, so that you can find, cases like this. We see that record one Benjamin and record three Kelly both come from Los Angeles. So that's the kind of result that we want to take a look at over here. And same with Alexander and Benjamin. They're different people, but they also come from the same city. So that's essentially what happens over here. Okay, so that pretty much covers this crash course. I didn't want to overwhelm you guys with too many examples, but I did want to cover at least some of the more powerful and useful techniques for writing queries that I think people should be familiar with. So just to highlight really quick, the difference between and or, that's one thing. Also using things like your parentheses to isolate your conditions, that's a very important thing as well. And things like using like, everyone should know how to use like, and wildcards, as well as these internal SQL commands like upper. And finally, how you can reference duplicate tables or numerous tables within the same SQL query statement. And also this distinct over here, which is very useful to avoid being shown numerous duplicates. So in this case, we didn't need to have distinct, but I just put it there just so you're aware of it. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful. If you did, then please hit the like button. And if you have any questions, or you want to find out anything else that I didn't cover in the video, then feel free to leave a comment and I'll try my best to get back to you. Till then, good luck with your query writing, and till next time.